Hello, everybody, and welcome to Fauxropter. In front of me, I have somebody who looks like they wanted to say those very words. And her name is Bobbie Gaucher.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. What word are we... Oh, wait, it's not a word.
No, today is a very special day for you because it's something you've been looking forward to.
I love a wee bit of cognitive dissonance.
So, John, what really riles you up about cognitive dissonance?
I am not riled up, particularly. The fact is, though, that by its very nature, cognitive dissonance gets people riled up.
I've heard about this.
Yes. So just to make sure we're all on the same page about what it is, cognitive dissonance is what happens. It's the feeling you get when you have two separate ideas, that's the cognitive part, that clash, but that are both true and that you have to somehow live with them. And that's the dissonance part.
But is it two different ideas or is it an idea and an action?
No, it's... Well, oh yeah, it could be, but it's two different, let's say, realities. But like I'm saying idea, when I say ideas, I mean just, it could be an action, could be a fact, could be a happening.
Because you could have like a belief or like a moral system, but then, okay, I have three great examples.
There's a clash in there. So the word dissonance is basically saying...
The clash.
The clash, exactly. Not
so
the band.
You could have like knowing that it's bad to harm animals, but then you eat meat.
Perfect example.
Knowing that smoking's going to give you cancer, but you smoke.
Not quite the same, actually. I don't think addiction can be quite like correlated to cognitive dissonance just because it can produce it, but it's like, yeah, maybe. But like I'm a bit wary of saying that's something you're addicted to.
But what if you hadn't started smoking yet?
Yeah, I still feel like it's okay. I just don't think it's the best example. Yeah. Can I give an example?
Yeah, of course.
There are lots, throughout history, there have been lots of groups of people who believed that the world was going to end on a particular date. Okay? God was going to end the world because of humanity's whatever.
Y2K or 2012?
Lots and lots throughout history. It's called eschatology. It's the belief that the world will come to an end because of God's wrath or something, right? It's not just the world. It's not like the world's going to end because we're ruining the climate. No, that's... Although, actually, reasonable discussion to be had whether it's a kind of eschatology. Mm-hmm. But usually there's a very specific prediction, okay? And what tends to happen, and this could be like, for example, there's going to be a new Messiah. Somebody's going to show up. It's going to signal the end of the world. And therefore, everybody better listen to the leaders of the cult, basically, is what it is, right? Mm. This cult could be, 10 people. It could be a millions of people religion. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing, okay? There's a prediction that the world will end. Christianity has it. Book of Revelations, Jesus is going to come back. Going to be a sign, or I don't know.
Wouldn't be the first time, am I right?
I don't know what the order of events is, actually. I know there's going to be 4 horsemen. There's going to be an apocalypse.
Oh, there's locusts, too.
Probably, that's one of the plagues, probably. Mm-hmm. You know what? If you're not on the right side, at that point, you're
sayonara.
Shit out of luck, is what it says in the Bible, right?
So yeah, I did read that.
Yeah. So... Among the other cults that have said this, because let's face it, Christianity just started as yet another cult, right? Mm-hmm. They all have a date, but some of those dates were very specific dates in, let's say, the 19th century, okay? Mm-hmm. So you've got some cult, bunch of people, follow some leader, pretty much always a guy, some dude, probably sleeping with all the women in the cult. But for whatever reason, he has power over them. He has the ability to apparently see into the future, to prophesy and then say that the world is going to end on such and such a date. Mm-hmm. Everybody gets very excited about it. Everybody does everything that he says because this thing is going to happen. And then guess what? The date comes. And, oh yes, it could also be aliens are going to land. But it's basically, there's a prediction that will be falsified when that date comes and the thing doesn't happen, right? So what happens as a result is cognitive dissonance because those people who are in the cult have to live with the fact that their entire identity is based around this belief and acting according to it. And yet it didn't happen. It's gone by. It did not happen. Literally didn't happen. So there's enormous cognitive dissonance there. And what tends to happen is that, 1 in 50 people will go, crap, I guess it was all just a stupid story.
Mm-hmm.
And the other ones,
the other 49 will
double down.
Well, yeah, they say it was a miscalculation.
Exactly.
Yeah,
the leader, whoever, goes, oh, yeah, no, that's what I meant.
I forgot to carry the 2.
Something like that, right? And everybody's like, oh, yeah, of course. And it's going to be even better the next time.
So I think you're being a little harsh on those people.
Okay.
Because I think...
It was just an example.
Yeah, but you said those people a couple times. You also called Christianity a cult, which I'm not sure everybody will love.
I'm sure everybody will not love it.
Yeah.
But, it did start as a cult.
Really doubling down on that, aren't we?
Well, there was already a religion, and a bunch of them decided that there was this, Messiah guy, and they were just going to go and there was a leader they were going to follow. And
all religions have messiahs, and they have their beliefs. And that's okay.
Guess what I think? They're all cults.
Yeah, but people are allowed to believe what they want to believe.
And
part of belief systems are cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
No matter who you are and what you believe, there is going to be the devil's advocate. There always is. So then you kind of have to deal with how you're going to internalize your belief system, how you're going to act accordingly, and then how you're going to justify doing something against your belief system, whether it's religion, science, or whatever.
Mm-hmm. True.
So we all live with a level of cognitive dissonance. To understand it makes us a little bit better to know, that's kind of my question is, does it make us better to know that we're being hypocrites?
It's not a question of being hypocrites either, right? That's not quite the same thing, because being a hypocrite is doing the opposite to what you're saying. That's what being a hypocrite is. And that you can be quite conscious of. There doesn't have to be any dissonance there. You can just be an asshole and just do whatever, just do lip service to a thing and then act the opposite. Like, let's say some politician who says, they have super traditional values, but then they go and have an affair or something, and then it's...
Yeah, well, that's kind of the obvious answer is no sex before marriage, and then you have sex before marriage.
Yeah, so that's not cognitive dissonance. That's just doing the opposite to what you're saying. But your example is good, though. I'm happy you mentioned science, though, because it's not... it's true that I brought up example of cult religions and stuff like that, but, same thing goes with science, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you have a belief that becomes a part of your identity is the key thing. Because having a belief and then that belief being challenged and being open to changing your mind is actually what science is. Mm-hmm. The problem is, let's say, you believed...
The earth is flat.
Huh? The earth is flat. Okay. Yeah. You believe that the earth is flat or something, and then you see all this evidence that it isn't. Well, then you have to... But even then, it had to have been a big part of your identity. But let's just take a hypothetical. Let's say you believed in the COVID vaccine. Right? I've had the COVID vaccine and the boosters and everything, right? Let's say now it came out that something or other was wrong with it. I don't know what. I don't think anything is wrong with it. But let's just say something really significant, right? Because nothing is perfect, but something truly significant was wrong, right? And all those people were right, the anti-vaxxers, right?
It makes your penis fall off.
That's a fair example, but let's not go with that one. Let's just say that it turned out the anti-vaxxers were right somehow, okay? It'd be really difficult to go
to suck it up and be like...
To suck it up.
Yeah.
So, and the reason it would be really difficult is cognitive dissonance. So, the reason I brought this up, though, is because I believe that cognitive dissonance is basically the world we're living in now, okay? It's we go back to some of the stuff we talked about with nature, about climate change and whether man is a part of nature or separate from nature or lording it over nature or whatever. And for anybody who didn't listen to episode 28, the first episode of this season, go back and have a listen because we discussed this at length. The reality is that a bit like the loving animals but eating meat thing, you can genuinely be in favor of, not ruining the planet, but genuinely drive a car, in fact, do almost anything in modern life, which is exactly why I think it is a defining state of our age, because you have no choice but to have cognitive dissonance.
I don't disagree, but I think it's unfair to peddle that narrative of that we just live in a world of cognitive dissonance.
Unfair to whom?
Unfair to every single person.
Okay.
Because we live in a world of information now.
Uh-huh.
Everything that you could possibly want to know is at your fingertips, but the world we live in, we can't quantify truth anymore. And I think that's the issue that you've hit on. And to sum it up with cognitive dissonance is a disservice. Because I agree that you can have all the information in the world and build an argument against yourself. You're right about driving a car, it's bad. you have to recycle, but every once in a while you don't recycle. You have to eat organic when you can. You need as little waste as possible.
Or, for example, take reusable shopping bags, and anybody who wants to can go back and listen to the previous episode to learn about that.
So I agree that everybody is in a state of, not everybody, people who choose to think, is in a state of cognitive dissonance. But also the counter argument is to just have your own truth, I would say. Like to just have kind of one belief system and stick with it. And it's ignorance. It's narcissism and ignorance that's the counter argument. Is that most of the world lives that way, which is what it is, but I don't think that's a new thing.
Right. But when you say the word disservice, what if I understand it, what you're getting at is the people who aren't ignorant. It's like we shouldn't be kind of blaming them because...
You can't. Everybody's trying to be... Like, if you are living with cognitive dissonance, it's because you're trying to be good.
Yes. Okay, so I wasn't blaming them. And in fact, the point of what I'm saying is I think it's the majority of people, let's say in the Western world, who have to deal with these issues of having like cars and stuff, doing stuff that does bad things to the planet, or involves like child labor or, mining nasty things in a mine in a poor country.
Cognitive dissonance is the repercussion of third world problems in the first world.
Right. So I wasn't certainly not blaming people who feel it, but my point was really that it's the state of affairs right now for anybody who has any kind of like ability to see reality and have a conscience and have some kind of morality, because you have no choice but to have cognitive dissonance. And I suspect this is the reason for a lot of anxiety that people have. That's what the dissonance produces. It's emotional. It makes you feel anxious. It makes you feel bad that you're doing this. So you're in a constant state of feeling bad. And the answer is not to be like, well, in that case, fuck everything. I'm going to just drive my Hummer or something to the store and get my plastic bags or whatever the thing is, running over several children on the way as they,
As they do.
As the children, like, sew clothes for some fast fashion brand.
As the children smoke their cigarettes and eat their steaks.
Yeah, exactly. You could be like that. And there are people who are like that.
Well, there's a lot of people like that.
And those guys are just shitheads, right?
And they also have the biggest microphones.
They have very big microphones, that's for sure.
And they like to tell you how big their microphones are.
And this is kind of the problem, because a lot of people can see the attractiveness of that narrative because it feels shitty to have the cognitive dissonance, right? It's anxiety producing. So if you're some kid who's just becoming aware of the dissonance, like becoming aware in the sense of feeling it, right? Oh, there's an escape hatch, right? That you can go through I don't really have to feel bad about this stuff. And in fact, going back 2 episodes now, because a lot of it's just natural. It's just the natural order of things, just the way things are.
Okay. But I think there does have to be a way to live in the world without constantly having that struggle.
It would be great, right?
No, but not that it would be great. There has to be a way. I don't agree that if you're a conscious human being who is doing their best to be pleasant, you just have to live in this kind of state of anxiety and depression. So
next week, folks, we solve humanity.
Well, no, I won't leave this episode without figuring it out.
Oh, okay. Cool.
Because either like you get to be a narcissistic prick or you get to be depressed. That's bullshit.
Or at minimum anxious. Well, I agree it's bullshit. I just don't quite have the solution, but I'm happy to be able to work it out now. So again, folks, stick around. It turns out in this episode for the next 8 hours while we figure this out.
But you know what? Because your argument's not new. That's the thing that's kind of it's upsetting and bugging me. It's it's not new. Like in the 80s, they had their own cognitive dissonance. Like in the 70s, they did.
I know. Exactly. It's not new. My point isn't that cognitive dissonance is new. The point is that it has become just overwhelming.
Well, that we're hyper aware.
Because of what you said about the amount of information we have. Yes. And because of reality, we were destroying the planet already in the 80s, but not as bad as now, right? So things have got worse.
Because we keep having human beings. The more human beings are here, the worse we are.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But that's... go ahead. Figure it out. Let's go.
Well, no. So both of us have seen The Good Place.
Yes.
And I think it kind of nails it on the head when they talk about the different, how human beings at this moment, anytime they do a good action, there is 90 bad actions that go along with it.
Bad consequences somehow. Right.
That are unintentional.
Yeah.
there's a lot of examples of cognitive dissonance that are like very in your face, obvious, doing harm. But there's a lot of them as well that you're not actually doing harm. Like, so recycling's a good one because recycling's not as good as you think it is.
Mm-hmm.
So are you supposed to not recycle because you kind of know that it's kind of icky?
Right. Like, well, so no, but it is a good example because we're kind of finding out more and more, and it really depends where you live. But
are you going to stop recycling?
Okay, so there's a sort of secondary level to that, which is we all know it's probably best not to create waste as much as possible, right? So that waste can either potentially be recycled or definitely not, right? And the stuff that can potentially be recycled, well, at least let's sort of set it to one side and see whether it gets recycled. But then again, a lot of people take action where they buy, in bulk or they do whatever so that they reduce the amount of waste anyway, or they compost their organic waste and this kind of thing, And I mean, The Good Place is a great example. So for people who don't know what that is, that's an American sitcom that ran for like 4 or 5 seasons a couple of years ago. Yeah. And it's really about moral philosophy, even though if they'd have said that, like, it probably wouldn't have got made. But it's fantastically well done because it does go through all of these ins and outs.
If you look at the Renaissance and the philosophy that comes out of there, it's very black and white. And the further we've gone with it, you realize that you can't... Morals aren't black and white. They're so grayed.
They're contingent on the reality.
Exactly. So now the reality is that you know that recycling is going to have a negative effect. However, to not recycle has a greater negative effect. So we're just living in a world of the lesser of two evils.
Doing your best, lesser of two evils. Don't worry about it.
So I would argue if you were doing your best, there is room to kind of push the cognitive dissonance down. Because if you are actively trying to be better and help other people around you, I don't think you have to focus on cognitive dissonance.
Yeah, there was a certain person called John Lennon who once said in a song, thanks for the eye roll there, Bobbie, off camera. Don't have cameras, so it's always off camera. All the eye rolls, everybody, always off camera. Who said in a song called Revolution, we're all doing what we can.
So I think that's the important part.
Yeah.
I don't disagree with you that, like, you shouldn't be ignorant and you should pay attention to it and you should look. Because at the end of the day, cognitive dissonance, call it whatever you want, it's the gnawing feeling in your stomach when you know you're doing something wrong. So yes, it exists and it's there, and there's a lot of times that you have to listen to it. But I don't think we have to constantly be living in a world where you're, like, kind of rumbling with it. If something makes you uneasy, don't do it. And if you are doing something that, of course, could have 99, like, just like Spider-Man said, with great responsibility. No, with great
power
comes great responsibility.
Right. Yes. Okay. So agreed. In terms of actions that make you feel crappy, let's just say, try to minimize those. Yes. Agreed. But I feel like you're focusing on the aspect of cognitive dissonance that's really about things you can do. But there's another aspect to it, which is the state of the world. Okay. So the people in the cult who thought the world was going to end in 1847 or whatever, they didn't have something to do. After the world didn't end, they had nothing to do. They had to just be like, I have to deal with this reality. So the dealing with a reality in a mental sense, in an emotional and cognitive sense is the problem, right? Where nevertheless, we live in a world where crap happens so that we can have cell phones, and other crap happens so that we can drive cars and stuff like that, and that's why I feel like it all the same. It's just the way of the world now. And I don't think there's a solution to that at all, except putting your head in the sand or being a nasty narcissist, like you were saying. Or
being an activist.
Yeah, or being an activist, exactly. So that's the other side of it. You're right. Is trying to make change happen.
And I'm not saying...
The reality is that change isn't going to happen right away or even tomorrow or the day after. So the cognitive dissonance is still there.
But it's not going to happen if you don't do anything.
Agreed. So we should work hard for so that our grandchildren don't have to have cognitive dissonance.
No, I'm strongly against repopulating the world.
Oh, right. So that there will be no grandchildren.
But for sure, stick your head in the sand. And I know that being an activist doesn't mean go and protest in China, but help your community. I nail on this so hard in multiple different episodes. But if you want to do something, go and do something. There is good to be done. So do something good. It's not going to make your stomach hurt.
I agree with you. That is actually probably a way of dealing with that, because the shitty feeling you have because of the dissonance can at least be kind of counteracted by doing something good.
So I think that is kind of the essence of like my good place example is there's so much bad. Just do something good to try and balance it. And I agree with you that on like a global scale or larger scale, or even in a cult, when that day doesn't happen, there's this huge internal struggle. I don't think you have to look around you and be like, oh my God, what are we going to do about the world? Just focus on yourself. And if you can balance that out so you're a little bit better than bad, then maybe your neighbor will be a little bit better than bad.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe their neighbor will be a little bit better than bad.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe their cousins will be a little bit better than bad. Then all of a sudden, things aren't looking that bad.
So not even just yourself, but your community, however you define it, family, community,
Mm-hmm.
people who you can have some sort of effect on potentially.
Like instead of it being a trickle down, it can be a grassroots.
Grassroots is the opposite, right? It's the growing up.
Exactly.
Yeah. And grass, you know what? That can break through concrete. In fact,
breaking on through
to the other side is one way of putting it. But it's true that like this sounds very hippy dippy, but like grass really just does break through concrete.
Yep.
Doesn't even have to try. Basically, just a thing it does, right?
Yeah. It's just natural.
Oh, nice. Nice wrap up.
Thanks, man.
Okay, I have wrapped this up in my mind because I no longer have any cognitive dissonance whatsoever.
Well, at least there's like a small solution or window for goodness.
Yeah, and hopefully, people listening who might recognize this and sort of say to themselves, yeah, it's true. That is a thing, a sort of underlying buzz that I feel that is not nice. Mm-hmm. It's almost like one of those, when there's a buzz from some traffic or something, or whatever there is, some machinery, and it gets turned off. That's when you notice it, right?
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way of doing that, of turning it off for a bit.
Yeah, and I think, like, personally, like, there's multiple things I can think of that I'm like, oh yeah, I completely ignore that because I don't want to really feel it. But it just sits there.
Yeah.
You're right, it's an underlying anxiety. And then once you finally deal with it, you're like, oh yeah, that's so much better.
Yeah.
And while there's so many giant problems that absolutely you cannot fix by yourself, there's very small ones you can.
Mm-hmm. And the measurement scale for cognitive dissonance is like tummy tightness, or is it shoulder heightness?
Ooh, I do say often that my shoulders are in my neck.
I know. That's why I'm saying that.
No, I would say it's tummy tightness, not shoulder tightness.
Okay.
Yeah. Kind of makes you nauseous.
Yeah. Right. And nausea that's an existential philosophical concept right there about alienation in the modern age. So this kind of ties into that too, but we don't need to go into that now because I feel like that's another episode.
Perfect. Can't wait for alien nausea.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly what that's about. Existentialism is about extraterrestrials who make you feel sick.
Yeah. Extraterrestrials throwing up.
Yeah. So thank you for listening. And if you have any thoughts on anything we've talked about today, please let us know via our email at
Fauxropter@gmail.com. And please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're listening to us.
And if ever you feel bad about not having rated and reviewed,
then just tell a friend about us.
You can also deal with that cognitive dissonance by rating and reviewing us on whatever platform you listen to us. It actually is really good and really helpful because it helps other people discover the podcast. If we get 4 or 5 stars, how many stars that you can give on the platform's rating system, go ahead. It's like a click or 2, right? And then more people hear about Fauxropter.
Thank you so much for listening, and we'll catch you next week.